Hello there, I'm Sin. We are in the Book Nook, and today we are going to talk about my past, present, and future of books. What I finished, what I'm in the middle of, and what we're going to get into. All right, so recently I finished the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Absolutely fantastic. As someone who is a gardener, someone who likes to get out in nature, I'm always trying to grow new plants and make my garden a garden of, I don't know, chaos. Not really chaos. It just turns into chaos. It starts out orderly and then it just does its own thing. This past year, my tomato plants were like, I referred to them as like octopus plants because they just grew all over each other. I had so many tomatoes. It was crazy. Anyways, Spreading Sweetgrass. It's the author's experience as an indigenous person, her connection to plants and nature, and then also going to school and becoming a botanist and having the scientific background for that and combining those. And how at first she didn't do that, but then seeing like how much it can make a difference to bring that together. And you get all these different vignettes of like her with her family, the experience of like making maple syrup, getting into different plants, talking about witch hazel, which basically, okay, so some of the stuff in this book convinced me some of the things I'm going to do in my garden this year. So, witch hazel, there's a specific variety that is native to Michigan, and I looked it up and I can get some 1 to 2 foot plants for like $10 from a nearby place. So I'm gonna get 2 witch hazel bushes to plant in the yard. And then also she talks about the three sisters growing method for corn, beans, and squash. And I'm trying that this year. I have the perfect spot to do it. And I'm gonna do the mound system. So there's a few different ways you can do it. You can do like mounds where you do like the corn and you succession plant. So you do corn first, then you wait a couple weeks. It has to be about like I think 6 inches tall for the corn, and then you plant your beans. The beans will like grow up the corns. If you do them too soon, the beans might strangle out the corn and whatever, something like that. So you got to do it in a certain order. And so you let the beans go for maybe I think about a week, and then you plant the squash, and they all kind of support each other. The beans fix nitrogen into the ground, which helps them to grow, and this, that, and the other. So this book convinced me to do two different things for my garden. We'll see how it goes. I will probably include some video of that in the upcoming months in the spring and summer. So if you're interested in seeing some of my garden adventures, I'm not good. I'm no Kevin from Epic Gardening, but I like to try sidetracked. I like talking about gardening and plants and stuff. So, anyways, Breeding Sweetgrass is a beautiful book about connection to nature. It also talks about some of the realities of, where the lands have been poisoned from like toxic runoff and all these different like chemical factories that just like ruin different areas, and trying to save those lands and bring them back to their former glories, if that's even possible. It's the long journey to do that stuff. And then there's also this one part in the book too where she takes all her students to like this big marshy area with like cattails and stuff. And so they go and they like stay, I think it's for like 5 or 6 weeks. And so they go there and they call it like wall marsh, which I thought was kind of funny. And they get like everything they need from there. They get stuff for food and to make like shelter and to do all this other stuff and like being out there in the sun, getting sunburned. And then there's also like this stuff. I don't remember if it was from the root of the plant or in the leaves, but there's like this slimy part of the cattails that's good for sunburn and stuff. So they could use that on them almost like an aloe vera and whatnot. And it like gets into that and all the different uses. It's so freaking cool. It's a subject matter that greatly interests me, and it's poetic as well, the way it's written, and it's so beautiful. If you haven't read Braiding Sweetgrass and you like anything that has to do with nature, highly recommend it. All right, now what I'm in the middle of, not even in the middle of, I'm maybe like 30 pages in. I started Vostok, which is the second book in the Loch series. So the Loch series was about like, it was like a Loch Ness monster kind of cryptid horror. So this is the second book. And this also is kind of like a crossover book with Steve Alton's other book series, The Meg, about the Megalodon shark. And it's, I think, the fifth book that it's the crossover with, the Night Stalkers book. So there's this lake, which is Lake Vostok, and it's a 15 million year old subglacial lake. And it's beneath 2.5 miles of ice, and it's the coldest spot on Earth. And then the pressure from like the immense weight, it keeps its waters liquid. And then there's also like the geothermal vents down there. So that can also support life. So Vostok, that's like the namesake of the book. I'm just getting to the point where the one marine biologist They want him to go over to this other area in Antarctica to visit this other base to where the Australians are working. They're near this part called the Amory ice field, and there's this fissure called like Loose Tooth or whatever, and they discovered something in there. And what it is, they need him to identify. And it's like the body of what seems to maybe be like a big old sea serpent. And well, we all know that Zachary Wallace, if you read the first book, The Lock, he discovered a lot of Nessie type creatures, and he might be able to identify these. So that's how he's going to get pulled into this. But yeah, I'm not very far in. I just got to the part where the one scientist, his last name is like Nilsson or Nielsen, has just got there, and he's just seen this creature. And he's like, I can't identify it, but I know a guy. That guy is Zachary Wallace. I loved the first book. I flew through it. This book I was actually supposed to read for the Cryptid Readathon, but I was not able to fit in all the books that I wanted to in the month of November. Sometimes we get a little overzealous with the amount of books that we want to read, and we just don't have time for all those books. I want to have time for all the books, but sometimes I just don't. That's why I'll get stuff from the library and then return it and then forget that I had grabbed it and then get it again and then maybe eventually read it. I don't know. So that's what I've finished and I'm in the middle of, and I'm going to read more of Vostok tonight. All right, so then I got a couple other books from the library. This next one, I like to read celebrity biographies from time to time, and so I got Al Pacino's Sonny Boy. I had seen it, and I was like, I don't know. I do like Al Pacino quite a bit, but then I saw this is where like influence comes in, right? I followed Ben Stiller on Blue Sky, and he was saying how great this book was, and I was like, all right, Ben Stiller, I'm gonna read it. You convinced me. So I picked it up, and let's tell you a little bit about it. To the wider world, Al Pacino exploded onto the scene like a supernova. He landed his first leading role in The Panic in the Needle Park in 1971. And by 1975, he had starred in 4 movies, The Godfather Part 2, Serpico, and Dog Day Afternoon, that were not just successes, but landmarks in the history of film. Those performances became legendary and changed his life forever. Not since Marlon Brando and James Dean in the late 1950s had an actor landed in the culture with such force. Pacino was in his mid-30s by then and had already lived several lives. A fixture of avant-garde theater in New York, he had led a bohemian existence working odd jobs to support his craft. He was raised by a fiercely loving, mentally unwell mother and her parents after his father left them when Pacino was a boy. But in a real sense, he was raised by the streets of the South Bronx and by the troop of wild and wayward young friends he ran with, whose spirits never left him. After a teacher recognized his acting promise and pushed him towards New York's fabled High School of Performing Arts, the die was cast. In good times and in bad, in poverty and in wealth, through pain and through joy, acting was his lifeline, its community, his tribe. The book's golden thread, however, is the spirit of love and purpose. Love can fail you and you can be defeated in your ambitions. The same lights that shine brightly can also dim. But Al Pacino was lucky enough to fall deeply in love with the craft before he had the foggiest idea of any of its earthly rewards, and he never fell out of love. That has made all the difference. And yeah, I'm excited to read that. I love Al Pacino and looking forward to this one. So we'll see Ben Stiller. All right, this next one I randomly grabbed. And I have never read a Haruki Murakami book, but this sounded pretty cool. The city and it's on certain walls. I read the premise. It's a sci-fi fantasy type book, and let me tell you about it. We begin with a nameless young couple, a boy and a girl, teenagers in love. One day, the girl tells the boy about a mysterious town surrounded by a high wall. In that town, the girl tells him, her real self resides. And if the boy could manage to come along, she might not recognize him, but he would find his own place. He could be a dream reader, each night reading old dreams. He isn't sure if he should believe her, but then one day she disappears, and her absence haunts him for the rest of his life. Thus begins a search for his lost love and takes the man into middle age and on a journey between the real world and this other world, a town where unicorns roam, where a gatekeeper determines who can enter and who must remain behind, and where shadows become untethered from themselves. Listening to his own dreams and premonitions, the man leaves his life in Tokyo behind and ventures to a small mountain town where he becomes the head librarian. only to learn the mysterious circumstances surrounding the gentleman who had the job before him. As the seasons pass and the man grows more uncertain about the porous boundaries between these two worlds, he meets a strange young boy who helps him to see what he's been missing all along. A love story, a quest, an ode to books and to the libraries that house them, and a parable for these strange post-pandemic times. And I thought that sounded quite magical and beautiful, and I'm super excited to read this. So we'll be reading this one soon. Got some good ones coming up. I mean, I always think there are good ones coming up. That one specifically just sounded pretty awesome. It just sounds mysterious and magical and sad and heartbreaking, and all the feels and emotions I feel like might be in there. Guess we'll find out when we get into it. If you like videos where I talk about multiple things I am reading or have read, and if you haven't had a chance yet to see what my favorite top 10 horror books of 2024 were, the next video coming up will be about that. So stick around, check it out. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.